Little girl, I say to you, arise. In our gospel reading today, we just heard two accounts of redemption. The woman who had a flow of blood for 12 years was healed by touching Jesus' garment. And then the daughter of the synagogue official was raised after, to all appearances, had already died. And now in this passage, we see that each story relates to the other. Jesus begins with the story of the synagogue official, then shifts to the healing of the woman, and then returns back to the conclusion of the story with the synagogue official. We had one lectionary choice today to only do one of the two healings, which was of the synagogue official's daughter, removing the one in the middle. But that's not how Mark intended this to be read. He meant both of these incidents to speak to one another as a literary device, having one embedded in the other. And so as it goes, the synagogue official, his name is Jairus. Actually, in Latin, it probably would have been pronounced Jesús, which I think sounds a lot better. But we know him as Jairus. By the way, I just had a friend in college whose name was Jairo, a very common Spanish name based on this. But he was from Colombia. When he came to the U.S., he thought, well, people probably won't be able to pronounce my name in America. I'll be Jairo. I said to him, why don't you just keep your good Spanish name? It sounds so much better than Jairo. But anyway, we know him as Jairus. Yeru. So Jairus comes urgently to Jesus and says, my daughter's at the point of death. Will you please heal her? And on the way, as people were gathering about him, this woman who had heard about his healings, her faith being bolstered by what she had heard, touches the hem of his garment and was healed. This most likely strengthened the faith of Jairus, who saw this and had more hope then, of course, for his daughter. And so this is how faith tends to grow for us by degrees, stepwise. And we heard Jesus say to the woman, your faith has made you well. It can be a bit of a mystery how God works through our faith. Who are we to enable God to heal? He's the one who enables all things. But sometimes he waits for us to have faith before he acts. One simple way of looking at this is he's basically saying to us, look, I've already told you who I am, that I am loved, that I can redeem all things. Do you believe who I say I am? He wants us. It's a heart matter. And we see him vindicate who he is, and then we're able to ask him for more and more. And so it is, and in this case, we see that Jairus, when he arrives, the people are all wailing, and they're all saying, it's too late, she's already died. But he says, do not fear, have faith, reminding him, you can do this, you saw what I can do. And then goes in with he and his wife alone and raises her. And so at this point, though, we have a problem that we need to deal with. Because as we seek to be like this, as we seek to grow in faith stepwise, have you ever had a somewhat significant prayer you wanted to ask God, but you thought, well, what if I ask it and he doesn't answer? Then I might go backwards in faith. I might be crestfallen. It'll be harder for me to ask him for things more in the future. And to also acknowledge that this passage is also in danger of becoming irrelevant for us, because we've seen sicknesses that we've hoped would be healed that were not healed. We've seen people die who we prayed would be saved, who would be able to continue in this life. We've been disappointed. So I know you all well enough, a congregation like this, you all believe this. You all know that Jesus can heal and that he has healed many times in history. But the question is, do you believe this passage is relevant to you now? It's very easy to kind of set it aside and say, well, these are extraordinary circumstances. So in light of this, I want to ask you, what is a prayer that you're shy about asking for? Let's say an audacious prayer that's relevant to your life right now. What would that prayer be that you are hesitating, that you might be tempted not to ask right now? And what if I were to tell you that I know what your greatest prayer, the greatest prayer you could possibly ask, I know what that is? It sounds like somebody with a deck of cards who says, here, take a card. Don't show it to me. Look, I'm going to show you which one it is. See, it's the 4 of spades, right? So no, magic tricks, no gimmicks here. Is there a greater prayer than no matter what happens to you in this life, no matter what losses you encounter, God will redeem your soul and enable you at the end to see the redemption of all things. But first, the full redemption eternally of your soul. All right, someone says, here's the pastor just spiritualizing things. I've got bills to pay right now. I've got felt needs right now in my life. And yes, I have bills that are hard for me to pay too. But it is relevant to put everything into perspective. But what if I were to tell you this? Of all the things that you want in this life, temporal things, in time, that will make your life worthwhile, what if I were to tell you, actually promise to you, that there is no greater joy possible on earth, in time, than knowing you have peace for your soul and building the kingdom of God? And in fact, all saints have joy. One of the essential steps towards canonization, by the way, that they look at for saints is they ask the question, does this individual have joy? It's essential. All saints had joy at a very deep level. There's no greater happiness on earth. And every single individual who has become a saint, fully, sanctified as an example for us on earth, on their earthly pilgrimage, many prayers have been answered, and many haven't been answered. But on this way to eternal salvation, God meets temporal needs through prayer. But the question is, what is your greatest ask? What is your greatest desire? Is there a greater desire than having your soul be healed in the end? So the question is, as you're asking for things from God, is your ladder leaning on the correct wall? Some ladders just lead to a wall, and on the other side is nothing. But there is a ladder of prayer where the top rung is eternal redemption for your soul. God will meet your temporal needs on the way there. But this is the ultimate ask. And so, in light of this, we can look at this like asking for goals. Anybody who's read any success literature or self-improvement literature, you know that having written down specific goals makes you a bajillion times more likely to accomplish those goals than if you just have a vague idea of what you want to do in your mind. But have you ever thought, well, if I write down that goal and I don't make it, then I will have failed. So maybe I just won't write down that goal. But it's common sense, and it's proven that if you write down the goal, you will accomplish much more than if you didn't write down that goal. It's virtually guaranteed. It's a similar way with prayer, that if you ask for eternal redemption and temporal needs to be met on the way to serve that ultimate desire, God will answer and meet more and more of your needs. That is a promise. And so let's consider a saint who asked and had many prayers answered and some not. Let's consider St. Paul. St. Paul was a man who Well, let's just look at the end of the book of Acts. It's towards the end of the written account that we have of his life. And I'm going to give a little context before and after to help to see that this is in the context of the ups and downs of his regular efforts, his missionary efforts in building the kingdom of God. When they had appointed, now in the neighborhood of that place, where lands belonging to the chief man of the island, named Publius, who received us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. It happened that the father of this Publius lay sick with fever and dysentery, and Paul visited him and prayed, and putting his hands on him, healed him. And it goes on, there's more. And when this had taken place, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. They also honored us greatly, and when we were about to sail, they put on board whatever we needed. You see, temporal needs met, miraculous healings as well as food for the journey. But yet famously, one of Paul's prayers was not healed. Towards the end of his second letter to the Corinthians, to the Corinthians, he says, "So to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited." Now, certainly if Paul would ask, he would get rid of a messenger from Satan, wouldn't he? But then it continues, "3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.'" We can even be glad his trouble, he doesn't say what it is, of course, here, some thorn in the flesh, it can relate to any affliction that you have, that it wasn't healed because he got something greater. He was able to have a greater degree of grace from the Lord, which was sufficient for him. And he even says he becomes thankful for this unanswered prayer. "Therefore I will boast all the more, gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." You see, he got more power of Christ through an unanswered prayer. His ladder was leaning on the correct wall, the wall that led to the salvation of his soul. And this one affliction actually helped him get higher on that ladder, even though he couldn't have known that when he first asked. Now, we don't need to understand everything. We don't understand why there's evil in this world. There's not a full answer for that. Nor do we fully understand how Jesus, whose prayers were answered, right? So, he healed Jairus' daughter, he healed blind Bartimaeus, he raised Lazarus from the dead, who was certainly dead. But yet in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, "Father, if it be possible, may this cup pass from me." Now, somehow in his humanity, he hoped that this cross that he had already predicted might come about in a different way. But can we not be glad that that prayer was not answered? Because the cross did occur, as well as the resurrection. Jesus took on the greatest affliction, greater than any of us will ever encounter, the greatest thorn in the flesh, and he triumphed over it. And so doing, he opened up the kingdom of heaven eternally for your soul, and the ability to build that kingdom with joy on earth. When Jesus raised Jairus' daughter, he said, "Give her some food." Yes, meet her temporal needs. Those are important. But more importantly, because of the cross, and because of the crosses that you encounter, he's opened up a greater answer to prayer, that at the end of time, he will say to you, "Little girl, little boy, little girl, little boy, I say to you, arise."